Hi, I'm Jasper. Since I was a kid, my parents had been preparing me to take over the family business. We had everything, and such a life might seem perfect. But I dreamed of becoming an artist and applied to a school of art in secret. When I got a notification saying I had been accepted, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was happy, but my parents threw a fit. Mom burst into tears. Dad went ballistic. If you go to that school, we will no longer support you. That same day, I packed up and left home. The school was in another city. I booked a ticket and got to the dorms by the evening. Looking forward to a new life, I went up to the porch when I suddenly heard the roar of an engine. I turned around and saw a bike speeding up towards the dorms at high speed. It skidded and the biker fell off. Scared, I ran up to him to help. But then, the biker suddenly jumped to his feet, took off his helmet, and I realized it was a girl. For some reason, her face seemed familiar to me. Where could we have met? The girl suddenly bombarded me with accusations. Why were you standing in the middle of the road? I almost crashed because of you. Unbelievable. I had been standing by the door and hadn't even been in her way at all. But I didn't have time to say anything. She jumped back on the bike and drove away. Then a guy came up to me and told me not to mind her. That was Lucia. She's a real rebel. She's so mean, even boys try not to mess with her. I'm Kit, by the way. It turned out that Keith and I were roommates. After checking in, I turned on my laptop and registered on a website for freelancers. I needed money and hoped I would be offered a job soon. I quickly grew to love school, but I was running out of money and my job hunt wasn't going great. I worried about it a lot. But one day, my art history teacher came up to me. Mr. Allen had seen my profile on the website and asked me to paint him a picture for a good fee. I was shocked. I see that you are in a tough spot and want to support you. Besides, I like your style. I was very grateful to him. From that day on, I stayed late at school and started working on the painting. Instead of my usual paints, I used spray cans. I also borrowed a special varnish from Kit. One day, I was staying late in the workshop, as usual, when I suddenly heard loud voices. I looked out into the hallway and saw Mr. Allen and Lucia. The girl was shouting at my teacher. How dare she talk to him like that? After throwing a fit, Lucia left. As she was passing by me, I couldn't help but stop her. Are you crazy? Why did you talk to Mr. Allen like that? None of your business. Stay out of it. The school was closed for the night, and I kept working in the common living room of the dorm. I finished the painting, varnished it, and was going to use fire. It was my special technique, and usually everything worked out fine. But that time, something went wrong. The flames were too strong. What the hell? I managed to jump aside, but the fire had already spread to the curtains and carpet. The fire alarm went off, and the other students and our residence hall director came running to the living room. The fire was quickly dealt with, but I was accused of violating safety rules. The next day, they debated whether I should be expelled or not. But in the end, I was just kicked out of the dorm. I didn't understand what had happened. The fire shouldn't have been that strong. Unless someone had messed with my materials. Kit had given me the varnish. Had he set me up? I found him in the dorm and questioned him. Kit denied everything, and we ended up fighting. I lost my only friend in town. I had almost no money left, and I barely scraped together enough to rent a tiny room. Difficult times began for me. I was desperate and ready to take any job when I suddenly got an offer. The customer wanted me to restore several paintings. I had a little experience with such work, but I hadn't worked with such expensive paintings yet. It was scary to take on such responsibility, but the payment was good, and I agreed. The customer talked to me over the phone, and the paintings were delivered by their assistant. I spent almost a whole week working on them. Everything was going great, but when I was almost finished, something happened. That day, when I walked into the room, I saw that the paintings had been cut with a knife. I was completely stunned. They cost a fortune. I noticed that the window was open. Someone must have gone through it. But who would do it, and why? What was I supposed to do now? I was so anxious I couldn't sleep. The next morning, the customer called me. I had to admit that the paintings had been ruined. Of course, they got angry and demanded compensation. I took all my savings and sold everything I could. My headphones, Apple Watch, but it wasn't enough. Soon their assistant came to me and warned me that if I did not pay up soon, I would have big problems. I had no way of quickly earning so much money, so I decided to run away. I didn't have enough money to pay rent anyway, so I moved out. I had registered on a website using a pseudonym, so I hoped the customer wouldn't find me. Now, let's pause for a second. Remember how I said difficult times began for me? Forget it. That was the moment life got really hard. I had nowhere to go, and I was literally on the streets. I worked part-time as a loader at night, and went to school during the day and slept wherever I could. One day, they didn't pay me on time, and I didn't even have enough money for food. Staggering from fatigue, I wandered around the city and accidentally found myself in a weird area. I had no strength left, and I sat down right on the ground next to some abandoned building. Then I noticed some suspicious people heading toward me. It wasn't hard to guess what their intentions were. Most likely, they wanted to rob me. But since I had absolutely nothing they could take, they would probably just mock me. I was preparing for the worst when a bike suddenly drove into the alley at high speed. Those guys got scared and scattered. When the biker took off the helmet, I saw an angel. It was a girl in a white dress with wings on her back. Was I hallucinating? It was only when the girl leaned over that I recognized her as Lucia. She put her hands on her hips and glared at me, looking annoyed. Come with me. I was definitely hallucinating. I got on the bike behind her somehow. We arrived at a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was a complete mess. There were paintings and canvases with unfinished paintings lying around. Lucia turned on the microwave, cleared the table, and put a plate of hot food in front of me. I was so hungry that I immediately started chowing down. And then Lucia shocked me even more. If you have nowhere to go, you can stay here for now. I was so surprised I even choked. Why are you helping me all of a sudden? I'm kind by nature. Keep asking questions and you'll be back on the street. I didn't want that, so I kept all comebacks about her kindness to myself. From that day on, I started to live with her, but we hardly talked. Lucia didn't seem to notice that she had a roommate at all, so I was very surprised when one day she asked me for help. She was held up at school and asked me to get something for her. The place she sent me to turned out to be an advertising agency. There were different costumes in the box I was supposed to deliver. I realized that Lucia moonlighted as a commercial actress. That's why she had been wearing an angel costume the day she had saved me. I came back home and saw Lucia near the garbage cans. What was she doing there? As I got closer, I noticed stray dogs near her. Lucia was feeding them. She looked so cute that I felt lost. It wasn't like her at all. When Lucia noticed me, she immediately hid the dog food behind her back. There was an awkward pause. Coughing, I handed her the box. At home, we had dinner together for the first time. While Lucia was warming up the food, I realized that I had misunderstood what she was like. Her rudeness was just a defense mechanism, and she was actually kind. I wanted to get to know her better, but she kept shutting me out. One day, Lucia came home and told me that a graffiti contest was coming up. The winner would get a cash prize and a promising job. Lucia suggested we participate together. I loved the idea, and we started working on a sketch. Lucia had great ideas, and drawing with her turned out to be easy. When the sketch was completed, we found a building and started working. In a couple of weeks, the graffiti was ready. We stood in front of the painted wall, admiring our work. I hadn't expected it to look so cool. We got on the bike and were about to leave when I suddenly noticed some guys nearby. Among them was the assistant of the customer I had run away from. Damn it! They had found me after all. Looking right at us, the men came up to the graffiti, and that's when I noticed the buckets of paint in their hands. They were going to destroy our work. No, wait! Jumping off the bike, I ran up to them. They lowered the buckets to the ground. This is your last warning. If you don't repay the debt by the day after tomorrow, you'll go to jail. They left, and I grabbed my head. The day after tomorrow? Where was I supposed to get the money? Lucia suddenly put her hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. At that moment, something came over me. I don't even know where I found the courage for it, but I kissed her. At first, Lucia was confused, but then she suddenly kissed me back. Pulling away, I stroked her cheek. You are my angel. When we got home, my mom suddenly called me. Our family had been invited to an important event, and she asked me to go with them. At first, I wanted to refuse and almost hung up, but my mom was begging me so tearfully that I agreed in the end. Powerful businessmen and celebrities came to the event. I had already forgotten how to act at such parties and felt out of place. All sorts of people came up to us, but I didn't even try to remember their names. Then I saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was Mr. Allen. What was he doing there? Jasper, you've already met Mr. Allen, haven't you? He teaches you at school, but he's also a well-known collector. Mr. Allen, where is your daughter? A girl suddenly came up to my teacher. I gasped in surprise. It was Lucia. So she was Mr. Allen's daughter. I suddenly remembered where I had seen her before. One day, I had gone into the garden during a similar event and heard crying. A beautiful girl had been sitting at the side of the fountain. I had asked her why she was crying. She had said that her father constantly controlled her and forbade her from doing just about anything. I calmed her down and told her that she should make her own decisions. It was weird that it had taken me so long to remember that moment. Lucia wanted to say something, but Mr. Allen squeezed her hand and started to say goodbye to everyone. After they left, I decided to talk to Lucia at home. At the end of the evening, my father called me over to talk. I'm willing to forgive you and even pay off your debt if you drop out of school and come back. Hold on a sec. How did he even know about my debt? I had a terrible suspicion. Maybe the destroyed paintings had been his doing. When I asked him about it directly, he didn't even deny anything. Yes, your mom and I did everything, so you would have no other choice but to come home. But your customer is a real person, and you still owe them money. I was furious but got a grip on myself. Instead of fighting my dad, I asked for an extension. All I need is a little more time. I can win the contest. Give me a chance to prove myself and repay the debt without your help. It took some convincing, but eventually my dad agreed. When I got home, Lucia wasn't there. She didn't show up at school the next day, and I got worried. The contest was already the next day, and we were supposed to present the painting together. After a lecture, I came to Mr. Allen and asked him about Lucia. She often runs off somewhere, don't worry. It felt like Mr. Allen was hiding something. I was walking down the hallway, lost in thought, when Kit suddenly came up to me. Are you looking for Lucia? I live near the Allens and saw her last night. I saw Mr. Allen dragging her into the house by force. I immediately asked him for the address, and Kit suggested we go together. On the way, we talked about what had really happened with the fire. Kit remembered that the varnish he had given me had been provided by Mr. Allen himself. I was shocked. So it was the teacher who had set me up. When I got to the right house, I called Lucia loudly. She immediately appeared in the window of the second floor, and then I noticed something terrible. There were bars on the window. It turned out that Mr. Allen had locked her in her room. Kit and I walked around the house and noticed that the window on the first floor was ajar. We climbed into the house, went up to the second floor, and opened Lucia's room. Luckily, the key had been left in the keyhole. We quickly left the house, came back to the apartment we were renting, and she told us everything. My father wants me to be his successor. When I was a kid, he would lock me in my room, make me memorize art history, and draw. I love to draw, but my father's tyranny put a damper on everything. One day, during an event, I was sitting in the garden and crying. That's when I met you, Jasper. Your words changed my life. I realized that something had to change and went against my father. I even acted in dumb commercials to earn money for rent. Lucia said that Mr. Allen had known my parents for a long time. Some time ago, they had come to him and asked him to make sure I would be expelled from school. But that hadn't worked out, and I had only been kicked out of the dorm. After that, Lucia started to watch over me and had come to the rescue when I was in a tight spot. You helped me, and I wanted to repay you in kind. I hugged her and promised her we would deal with everything together. And you know what? We did. The next day, we won the contest, and we were being awarded the prize. I saw my parents in the crowd. I was given the floor, and I made a speech looking right at them. We wanted our graffiti to show the freedom and uniqueness of each person. I hope that it will help other people accept me for who I am. To my surprise, my mom teared up, and Dad shook my hand after the award ceremony. You know, this contest opened my eyes. You will achieve everything in your own way. I believe in you, and I won't stand in your way anymore. Mr. Allen came up to us after my parents. It turned out that he had been my customer. I wasn't all that surprised and handed him an envelope with the money, but Lucia intervened. Actually, it was my father's assistant who broke into your room and ruined the paintings, so you don't owe him anything. Well, I think I agree with your parents, Jasper. Live as you see fit, and keep the money. Lucy and I didn't really believe him, but it didn't matter anymore. Thanks to our victory, we got cool jobs. We kept going to school and creating murals. Life got better, and I was happy. But one day, everything changed. That day, Lucia went to a meeting and didn't come home. She didn't show up at school either, and I had a horrible feeling of deja vu. My heart was pounding as I went to the dean and found out that Mr. Allen had quit. His house was empty. Lucia's phone was unavailable. I was sure that Mr. Allen had taken her somewhere again, so I asked my parents to use their connections to find her, but they didn't succeed. Or maybe they just lied to me because they didn't want to cross a powerful collector. But I won't give up. I can't live without Lucia, and I will definitely find my angel. Do you think I can do it? Write in the comments down below. I could use some kind words.